Hi to everyone. I'm your host today. My name is Florencia. I'm from ARC. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our TED Talk What's New in Node.js as part of the Remote Engineer Global Job Fair brought to you by ARC. We connect developers, great developers, with companies around the world. So if you'd like to learn more about the companies that are actively hiring, we're going to be sharing the link in the chat. It's going to be over there if you want to go through the platform and learn more about ARC. Feel free to do it. Today we will be learning about the newest feature and enhancements in Node, as well as how they can be leveraged with code samples. And to make sure that you take full advantage of the talk, feel free to drop all the questions that you may have for the speaker. We have a Q&A section. You can, during the talk, keep adding the questions there, or at the end of the talk, feel free to do that. We're going to be answering that by the end of the talk, okay? Another important thing, you don't need to immediately be making notes. We're going to be recording this TED Talk for you to have it as well. So, well, now that we are ready, let's welcome our special guest today. Here with us is Hemanth, Senior Staff Software Engineer Manager at PayPal and Global Developer Expert. Hemanth is a FOSS philosopher, TC 39 delegate, DuckDuckGo community leader, member of the Node Foundations, and Google Launchpad Accelerator mentor. So without further ado, Hemanth, the stage is yours. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure. And thank you everyone for joining from different parts of the world at various times. And let's get started. I'll share my screen, and before that, I'll probably start my timer. I hope the timer has started. All right. What's new in Node? Hi, I'm Hemanth. I'm a TC39 delegate, a senior software engineering manager at PayPal. I'm a FOSS philosopher and also happen to be a Google developer expert for web and payments domain. You can find me at htman.com or tweet to me at Hemanth. I also run a few podcasts and blog about technology. So if you look into this graph, it talks about different versions of Node, starting from Node 14 to Node 20. Node 20 is what is being cooked now, and Node 19 is what's being currently available on live. And main, of course, is the main branch that is unstable, which would have some features that are cooking. In this talk, I will be walking you through multiple features, specifically from Node, says few in 16, and mostly it's 18 and above, till 20, and some are unstable. So some of the features you might have heard or you might have used, and some of them are new to you. So let's walk through these features and talk about why they are useful and how they're useful, and let's see some code examples to kind of get an insight into these features. One of the famous proposals in TC39 is the proposal top-level await. What does top-level await do, and how is it useful, and how can we use it in Node? Let's have a quick look. If you are used to promise and await syntax, if you've ever used await with promise, as we see in line 1 here, you would have probably end up with a syntax error saying await is only valid in async function. How do you resolve it? You would probably wrap it in an async function, like how we do in line 2. You wrap up in an async function, then you say await promise, resolve, then you get the resolved result, right? This is a normal process. What if you were to do await promise.resolve and it just works? Yes, top-level await feature talks about this, and it's a very good proposal. If you could go and read about it, it also links to you to another article where a gentleman who started Svelte speaks about saying that, hey, this is more like a foot gun, right? And then the community works with the proposal and says why it is not a foot gun. It gets approved and goes from stage 1 to stage 4 and gets implemented, right? And today you can use this, but the caveat is you can use it only in MJS and not JS. So type module, or you could say type module and then use await at top level. Or if you want to use it on CLI, you could say node -- input type module and then say eval, pass your code with top level await, and it works. So don't really need an async wrapper, and everything works fine with top level await. You might be thinking, where is top level await useful? Here are some examples. Some of them might be like a dynamic dependency pathing. In this example, we are importing I18N translated language for that particular navigator language. We are picking up that file. You can import that file, or you're using some resource initialization. You could await on DB connector and get the connection. Or probably you're trying to fetch something from the CDN and you say await import from the CDN. If it fails, you catch and then await something else. So in this example, you're trying to fetch foobar. If it fails, you get buzz, right? So foobass. So basically, you can use await in such examples and many such, wherever basically promise is and you want to use await at the top level and don't want to use the wrapper async function. This is how you could do it. Here's a small contribution to the node source from my end. I enabled using the -- experimental REPL await option without option as a PR to the node source, and it got merged and published. All it does is say if you were to pass experimental REPL await previously, then top level await used to work on REPL. Now you could say no experimental REPL await, or if you do, if in that case top level await wouldn't work. If not, it just works fine. Right? And that this PR talks about enabling -- REPL await, experimental REPL await on CLI. There's something called as strategic initiatives in Node. What are strategic initiatives, you say? So these are some certain number of initiatives that the Node core committee takes and starts resolving and improving the Node ecosystem. And all of this is open governance. It is not governed by a single entity. There are a lot of free and open source contributors and maintainers and collaborators working on proposals and ideas and bringing it to reality. If you look into the current initiatives, there are core promises API, there are HTTP3, Shadow Realm, things like startup performance, V8 concurrency, next tech, and single executable labs. There are some other completed initiatives made to be like CVV management or OpenSSL evolution and things like that. Right? For us, the current initiative is what is interesting, and let's probably dive into a few of these initiatives and see what's up with Node. So if you look into the initiative which talks about core promises API, there are some modules which are now getting core promise implementation in Node. So you can use a promisified version of those APIs. Of course, you can use top level await if you're using MJS, right? So there are a few like child process and cluster that's in progress. We have crypto for web crypto. We have DNS, which is promisified. We have read line streams and zlib also that's promisified now. So if you look at an example, if you were to get the promisified version of DNS, you would say require DNS.promises. You got the resolver, and I created a new resolver and set the server to 444. That's the open DNS, and then you do a resolver.resolve4 for example.org in this example. Then you get the address. Alternatively, of course, you could use async wrapper or a top level await and say await.resolver.resolve example.org, and it works fine. So basically, the DNS module is now promisified. Also, we have promisified FS module, the file system module within Node. So if you see, there is Node : there. That is the Node prefix. That makes sure that you're not using any userland library, but you're using Node specific core util, right? In this case, Node : FS/promise gives you promisified version of file system. From that, we are importing open, and then I say file await open a particular file to read, and then I use for off loop with await and say for each chunk file.readable web stream and log the chunk, and finally await and close the file. So as simple as that, everything is promisified. We also have readable web stream on the file, and it looks neat and simple and easy to read. You don't want to use those wrappers or callback hell and things like that, right? Here's an example of promisified timers, right? Timers are also promisified within the Node env. In this example, I'm importing set timeout, and you could just say await set timeout for X milliseconds and result, and it would print after those many milliseconds, just like set timeout, but promisified. Here's an example of using streams. Yes, streams is on Node. You could import a readable from stream, and I say await readable from file 1, 2, 3, 3 files, and for every file, you go and do a stat on that file, and if the size is greater than 1024 cross 1024, we would say, hey, these are the big files that you have out of these 3 files in this example. And you could set the concurrency, and the concurrency has been set to 2, and you saw that we are using streams and fs/promises for stat. Of course, you use the node prefix if you were to get the node specific util and not really an user land library. There was this request in 2015, yes, 2015, talking about, hey, web crypto is a standard now. Is web crypto API available in Node? Because it is in Chrome, right? And Chrome uses V8, and well, Node also uses V8. Why not we have web crypto API? Is one of the proposal that was made in 2015, and yes, today it is possible. You can require crypto and say web crypto. In this example, we are generating a key with a SHA-256. And then we use a text encoder and encode the message with "I love cupcakes" and sign and get the digest out of it. And this is how simple it works. And because it's an API that's evolving, it should be taken with a pinch of salt. That web crypto API provides a number of low-level cryptographic primitives, and it's very important. Like you should be aware of what you're doing, so you might misuse it or kind of get into a pitfall with some subtle errors, and which might cause huge security implications. There is another PR that got merged in 2020, which was for initial experimental abort controller. Abort controller is a standard web API that was experimental at that point of time, which got integrated. Let's quickly take a look at what abort controller is. Say you have a constructor abort controller here, and you did a new abort controller, and you got an abort controller, and that would give you a signal. And then you await on read line and ask a question, what's your favorite food, and pass the signal to it. And then you log saying like, oh, so your favorite food is whatever answer the user gave. What if your use case says, if the user doesn't reply in say 1000 milliseconds or 10,000 milliseconds, I want to abort this particular prompt on the CLI. And then you could use the signal and add an event listener called abort, and you're using it just for once, and you set a timeout and say ac.abort. So it basically waits for that particular amount of time and then sends an abort signal. And then you have the signal where you have an event listener which will listen for the abort event and then say, hey, looks like the signal got aborted. Now you will probably say, hey, the food question timed out, so probably I'll move on. So this is just a simple example. More convoluted example would be, say, for example, you're downloading a particular file and the user hits the cancel button or decides not to download, or they're streaming and they want to stop. Then you could use abort signal and cancel that particular promise that's happening, right? And you have total control over using abort controllers. And it's a good use case to use within fetch as well. Stream implementation from WhatWG is also a web standard for streams, as I mentioned in previous example. Got in on 2021. And how do they work? So the prefix here is node:stream/web to make sure that you're importing web streams and not really node stream or user land without the node prefix. So you say node:stream/web, you get a readable stream, and node:timer/promises, you get a promised timer from which I'm taking set interval. Then you can use performance hooks on node:perf_hooks. Then you use the readable stream and have a controller in it. So for every second, the controller enqueues the performance.now. So basically, if you go to your REPL and import performance from perf_hook and say performance now, it shows the performance at that particular time shot. So this stream is sending out values of that performance that got enqueued in the controller. Now you could go and use a for-off loop and use await syntax and say constant value of stream and log the value. You would get the performance node every tick, right? This is a simple example that integrates like performance hook and like timers on set interval and also readable stream from web stream. And this is in progress. Not everything that's in the standard has been implemented, and it's making a great progress, and it's getting there. Another example I would like to suggest, as we spoke in the strategic initiatives at the very beginning, is on node zlib. So that's also a promisified API here. So I'm importing stream promises from which I'm importing pipeline, and then have node.fs, then I have node zlib. In this function, all that's doing is it's taking a tar file and converting into a tar.gz, right? So basically, you read the file as a stream, and then pass it through zlib.create gzip, and then pass it to a writable stream and say archive.tar.gz. So basically, when you go ahead and run this particular method, it would go and create a read stream, zip it up, and then put it to the write stream. And all of it is happening using node streams promises pipeline method, right? And it looks so pretty and does the work that's needed. NDC is a library within the node env. You might be wondering why NDC and what is it? And it means 11 in Italian. I know there might be few folks who know Italian in the audience already. So 11 in Italian, and also if you're watching the Stranger Things series on Netflix, it has a reference on that. So Andiki is used to implement fetch. Here's an example with experimental fetch as a flag that's passed to node REPL, which on this example, I'm doing await fetch, an app that I'd hosted on Heroku that would send you a random XKCD cartoon. So it says XKCD images.heroku app and then .json. So this is just an example. So I'm chaining await with await fetch. It's not really advised to do that in terms of performance or even debuggability. So in this example, you await fetch that particular URL, you get the data, and then you say await.json, you get the JSON data out of it. In this example, you have an URL and title, and you can use fetch within Node today. So this was with experimental, and I have published a Node module called node-nightly. So if you were to do npm x node-nightly or npm install-g node-nightly, you'll get the nightly build of Node. What does nightly build means is every day whatever is stable on the Node branch, main branch, gets built and deployed. So you could use it, and Node nightly will fetch you that binary for your operating system. And in this example, I use node nightly and say fetch. You get the async function fetch, and I say node nightly no experimental fetch. I do fetch. It says, hey, I don't know what fetch means. So you can toggle based on this particular flag. And today the fetch is enabled by default. Happened on Feb 2022, already in year. And without the experimental flag, you can just open up Node latest and say fetch. It should be there at the global level for you. Along with fetch, we got form data. Here's an example on version 19.7.0. You do a new form data, and I do a form data.append name Hemanth, and I have all the form data related attributes and method here. I could do append entries, get all, set, and everything that you do with form data that you normally do on the web. Along with form data, we get the request API. In this example, I say new request and pass in example.com and pass in the body saying method is post and body is foobar. And then say request.url, get the URL, request.method, get the methods, or request.credential, request.body used, all of that API attributes. So you could do new request within Node today. Like if you are used to doing it in web, it's possible to use the same web standard on Node. We also have blob. You can say new blob, and in this case, I'm passing in status 200 and status text works great. There's a param. I think there is a missing flower braces which probably got formatted to the next line. And then you could say new response data and ops. So you can create this new response based on your data and options that you have. The option says it's 200, everything works fine. Or if you have an U8 array, you can pass in those UTF-8 bits and use the new text decoder method and say UTF-8 and decode that UTF-8, you would get hello world. And you have hello world, you can use new text encoder method and encode those values to UTF-8 bytes again. So if you were to play with this encoding and decoding of text, you have these APIs of text decoder and text encoder for which you can pass UTF-8 or 16, or based on your case, you could use those configuration and encoding mechanisms. The other interesting thing what we have is experimental network imports. I've hosted this MJS on my domain html.com/helloworld.mjs. So if you were to say import hello world from that particular URL, you could do that and execute it. So imagine that you have multiple teams which have shared libraries and they want to share it on HTTP on the URL on the over the network. They could do it, and it opens up new world where you could import things from CDN, share your common libraries, and may it be local or global. You kind of get access to import those URLs using experimental network imports. The other one here is if you were using package.json and if you try to import, it would probably fail. It would not import, and then probably you would require package.json. Now it's possible to import package.json, but we have to make sure that we pass an assert type JSON. That's because we don't want to import something malicious just because of the extension saying JSON, and it might import some malicious code. We don't want to end up with that. So we assert and say type JSON. You could import info from package JSON, assert type as JSON, or you could say constant info equals await import package JSON, and then pass in assert type as JSON. So you have two ways to dynamically import data, and you can import JSON files today. There was another proposal asking for, hey, what about we implement the file class? File is a standard web API. Why not we have the same within Node? Say we were to do a new file with blob data item and pass a name type to it, it should work. And there are many use cases for Node to use this API. And yes, today it's possible to use that. You could just say a new file with an empty array, and in this example I'm passing dummy.text.exe, and then you can strict equal that particular value. Say for example file.name is dummy.text.exe, file.size is 0, then file.last modifier is a number, and last modifier is less than the current time. So all of the file attributes and APIs is available with the new file API. Use only one copy of LLHTTP was an issue that occurred because of the previous lib I was speaking about, undici, which is used to implement fetch with Node. And there was this problem that was highlighted that, hey, looks like there are two copies. How do we handle this, right? And then it got resolved where they said, hey, support for external shared JS built-ins. And they said, hey, look, we will support for external shared JS built-ins so that you don't end up using like two copies of the same thing. And also there was an infra support for externally shared JS built-in that supports of distros that want to externally kind of share the dependencies within say JS or WASM, like two different envs, but still you can share your dependencies, right? That sharing kind of solved a bigger problem. That issue was just speaking about undici, but that solved a bigger problem with this PR, and it resolved things. I just wanted to highlight this part on how a bug that was intended to fix a particular issue might sometimes blow up to solve larger use cases. So if you're following TC39, there is this proposal of find last and find last index that is possible from version 18 and onwards on Node. In this example, I have an array of objects. I do array.findLast and say if my value is equal to 1, is that the second, is that the third element in the array? And it says, yes, that's true. So normally if you do a find, it happens from left to right, right? When you do a find.last, it happens from right to left. So for some use cases, you want to do the try to do the find from last. So suppose it's sorted, and you know for sure that you have your use case where you have to fetch data from the end of the array and not really the beginning. And also, if sometimes you need the index and not really data, so you can use find array find last array dot find last index, and the index in this value here is 2, right? So you have find last and find last index. And also on the internalization API, we have the new int locale, for which you can pass in the locale you have. In this example, the Arabic Egyptian locale has been passed. You can do dot calendars, you get all the different calendars that the Arabic system has, and then you can do collations, you can do hour cycles or number systems and time zone and so on. So you have total control on knowing what's up with the locale in terms of all these different attributes. And also you can see supported value of, if you pass in calendar and you are curious to know what are different types of calendars, or for your particular use case you want to know whether that particular calendar is supported or not. So you could say supported values of calendar, you get a list of array, and you can do like find last index or index of or includes and figure out whether your calendar is supported or not. Same with currencies, number system, time zones, or unit. And say we also have the internationalization API's number format API or method. Basically what it does, it takes the locale and then ask for the style and currency. In this example, we have a number 12345.78, and then I pass DED, currency, euro. I get the euro representation, or if I pass in yen, I get the Japan interpretation, or I pass in rupees for Indian and say maximum significant digits is 3, I get it in the rupee format. So you have, like, without using any third-party APIs, you have a standardized API, internalization API NTL, on which you can use number format. Shadow Realm, you can think of Shadow Realm as its own independent entity of a global space that has all of its scoping and mechanism apart from what the general eval global gives. So in this example, you can do new Shadow Realm to create that Shadow Realm and say Shadow Realm.evaluate. That eval happens within the scope of that Shadow Realm. So you do a global this dot realm value to be inner, and then you say global this dot realm value. So when you do the getter, you get inner, but realm value in global this will be false. So the global this will not have the realm, because Shadow Realm creates kind of an abstract layer within itself, so it doesn't leak out to the global space. So we get a total control on your own space, and that's kind of a web standard API that got implemented within Node, which can be enabled with experimental Shadow Realm flag, which is really exciting to play around with. And as I previously spoke in another example, we have blob exposed in buffer also today. So if you do require buffer, you see a blob cast, and you can use blob within the in the buffer module too. So buffer, the blob kind of graduated from experimental to global. So you can use it on the global space today whenever you have a use case where you want to use blob. So you might ask, is there an example where I can quickly see where blob and buffers are used together? Here is an example where from node buffer, I'm importing blob and buffer. And from timer promises, I'm importing set timeout, and I'm saying set timeout as delay. So I can use delay instead of using set timeout everywhere. And it's promisified. And I would go and create a new blob saying hello there. I get the blob. Then I use the message channel API. I create 2 message channels. And from one message channel, I would say, hey, go ahead and wait for a particular delayed amount of time, and then I wait for the data buffer to arrive and close. And then in the other message channel, I would say, hey, post this blob from MC1, the message channel 1. On the port 2, I post the message, the blob that I created, hello there. And from MC2, I do the same thing and post the message, the same message blob. So when I do blob.text, I can do, or I could just await blob.text and then console log. The blob is still usable even after posting, and the MC1 and MC2 would go ahead and log the data buffers once we post the message. So you can think of using this in terms of, say, you have some real time applications and there are multiple users connected to the same channel and you need to pass information across. This can be a quick boilerplate to expand on. So say you have a veg pizza with toppings of tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, and corn. And veg pizza plus, I do something called a structured clone. And when I do a structured clone on veg pizza and do veg pizza plus dot toppings, I push pineapples. I know that can cause a lot of arguments in the chat whether pineapples are allowed on pizzas or not, but I like them. And if you look into veg pizza dot toppings, it stays the same. Veg pizza plus dot toppings would have everything an array of pineapple too. So if you were to think of this today, if you were to manipulate the object, it used to get mutated. But with structure clone, you can do a deep clone and then operate on whatever level you want. And today, deep cloning is not completely plausible without a structure clone, right? So that's how structure clone helps you to kind of not also to mutate, avoid mutating the original data, but also to kind of clone it and operate on it at a deeper level. And this is available on the global space. The other interesting like util, I think most of you who have worked on command line programs would definitely would have passed a lot of arguments. And today it is possible to use node utils pass arg module like utility within the built-in. So you need not like npm install any particular argument parser. And in this example, I have args I'm passing -f, -, bar, and b. And options, I have foo and bar. And I say foo is of type boolean and it's short for f, and bar is of type string. Now I would pass args where args and options have been passed. The values that I get would be foo as true and bar as b. So it makes it super easy to parse the arguments that has been passed on the command line. Instead of passing it through command line, I've just added it here in an array to make it clear on how it works. And also you set your options saying my options are this and it's of type this. So all the validation and everything that's required happens there, and you also get the values and you also get the positionals. So you have total control on all of your arguments, no matter in which order they have passed on the command line. It doesn't really matter because you have all the positionals with you and you can operate based on the user's options. If you have worked with promises for a long time, you would have faced this issue where your promise gets resolved multiple times. It happens because async programming is not easy, and there might be cases where you have multiple promises and you kind of resolve it twice. What really happened and how do you manage it? For that, on process, we have multiple resolves, which is an event that process can listen on, and whenever there is a resolve that's happening multiple times, you get an alert saying you can trap that and start working on it. In this example, I have a new promise, I have a resolver, and I say resolve twice, and that will log resolve multiple times. That basically gets caught, and it can help you to debug and make things easier and process quickly in terms of rectifying and identifying the bug. And also this is a tiny util which is super useful if you're looking for if you're doing some kind of a parallelism or parallelized programming and you want to check if your OS supports that, or what is the number of available parallel processes that can run in this OS. You could say os.available parallelism. You get 16. This is my machine, and it says that's the value that can be the amount of parallelism that this device can achieve. And let me run this video. So I am passing node --watch foo.js. If you look into the example here, I have a foo.js which says console.log meow. And then I say node --watch foo.js. It says completed running foo.js, and it also shows an experimental warning. Now I go to the file, and instead of meow, I'll probably go ahead and change it to something else, say wow, and save it. It restarted foo.js and wow was printed. Did you see the magic of this happening without any external node modules? I just use node --watch, and it just watches for that file. You can also do it on a path or set of files, and whenever that file changes, it recompiles or reruns that particular file instantly. You can think of this as a replacement for node mon and other node modules which were previously doing this, and this is in node without like any external dependencies. Also, node 18.6 exposed describe and it. You can import it from node:/test. If you're into testing, and if you have, I'm sure if you're into programming, you would have definitely written a lot of unit tests. Now it's possible to use node:/test and do a describe. In this case, I'm saying the unary plus operator, and it should add two numbers, and doing an assert on strict equal 1 + 1 is 2. Here's a catch: is it really an unary operator or a binary operator? All right, yeah. So you could use import describe and it from node test. Here's an other example where you can mock, not only just import and assert, you could also mock the methods. In this test, I'm saying spice on an object. So I have a number object which has value 5, and then I add like method on it which kind of returns this dot value plus a, and I would say t.mock method number add. Now if I say number.add 3, I get 8, and number.add.mocks.call.length would be 1. That means the mock has been invoked. So you could also go ahead and mock for your testing, and all of this is baked, and this works well with, say, suppose you have your own module of choice, say Ava or Mocha and things like that, and you can easily gel this up with your testing framework, and this kind of gives you the power to expand on what is available as base util. And today, as we speak, there is also an experimental feature which can work on coverage. So it could also give you the coverage reports for your test, how much of the code was covered, how effectively is your test. That's kind of gets covered in this particular mock functionality. So the dependency of URL parser was replaced with ADA recently. That was on Jan 29th, and we did see that there was 87, basically 87% faster URL parsing. So ADA is a library that is using modern C++, and this was used to replace the generic normal implementation of URL.parser within Node, and that has given us a tremendous amount of performance with URL.parse. So if you're used to the URL built-in module, and if you're parsing the URL, it's gotten super fast with this particular implementation and integration. There is also this abort util that got recently merged into the main branch. You could kind of import that with node:util import aborted, and with that, I think that was a timer that I had set. I still have around 5 minutes, and node:util you get aborted. You could say constant dependent equals obtain something that's abortable, and then you say dependent on event. You go and say dependent on abort. So the abort util is kind of listening to dependent.signal, and whenever the dependence is aborted, this callback gets invoked. Basically, this promise gets resolved. So you might be thinking of this as very much close to abort controller that we saw, but it is a node util on aborted, so you could use it on anything that is abortable, not just like the abort controller and signal and passing it to say fetch. So you have control on anything that has signals, and that can be aborted. This is a very unique and an interesting util that got merged into the node source. One of the strategic initiatives that I mentioned was about using it as a single app, like single executable app. In this example, it just says console.log hello, process argv2, pass it to hello.js, and I say command -v node, get the path and copy that to hello. And depending on your OS, I would use postcheck, which is also a node module that goes ahead and packs all of your binaries of node and compresses it to the maximum extent and creates a single executable. In this case, I do /hello and then password. It works wonderfully with hello world. So if you pass in this package to anybody or any OS which doesn't even have Node, but if you do a /hello word, it works fine. So it's more like packaging your entire source to a single executable file and sharing it with the Word. Think of it of writing multiple applications, may it be command line or GUI and all of it, but can be packed and published to environment which doesn't even have Node. This is kind of a revolutionary thing, and this is cooking as we speak, and it's a very interesting thing to dig and explore. The other interesting like API is experimental permissions. So you have file system or child process or worker threads. You can manage all of them with different flags saying that whether the file processing or the file system should be accessible or not. You can allow or deny. Same thing can be done with workers and child processes. You can allow or deny. All of this is possible using permissions.deny with scope and parameters, or you could check permissions.has this particular scope and parameters. So you can have total control on file system or child process or worker threads on whether a particular process can use this or not. In this example, when I'm passing node with experimental permission on index.js, it throws an error saying that, hey, access to this API has been restricted. And it says error access denied, file system read. So you can't really do a read because this API has been restricted, and you get, like, you can imagine different control flows that's possible. And I think something like this was very first introduced on Dino. Dino is kind of a counterpart for Node, which Ryan Dayal, the founder of Node, kind of had his own challenges with Node and started Dino. And today we have experimental permissions in Node as well. Well, with that, I end my talk, and I hope you got to see some of the APIs that you weren't aware, and maybe you knew most of it. And I hope you enjoyed seeing these examples, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have. Thank you.
Okay, now thank you so much, Hemanth. This was a great talk. For me, everything is new. I'm starting to code with JavaScript, so seeing all the console log and it was like super cool. I didn't understand like too much, but it was good to like keep track of it and think, oh my god, maybe someday I'm gonna be able to code like this. So thank you so much for your time for joining us.
Okay.
I know that you told us that maybe because of all the content of the talk, the questions might be appearing like later. So if
Yeah.
it's all right with you, like feel free to reach him through his social media, ask him any questions, and also if you have some questions now, feel
Right.
free to like drop it. We have a Q&A section. So you go on the box Q&A
Mhm.
and you can have it over there for all of you. We have like, will the recording be available to rewatch it later? You were right. Yeah, it's gonna be available. We're gonna send the for you to know. Um, well, so once you are thinking of questions, I have some questions for you, Hemanth, if it's alright with you, that I would like to ask you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Like the first one that I have that I think like it's good for all us to know, like what is the piece of advice that you would have loved, like someone have given you, like I don't know, a year ago that will have helped you in your life?
Oh, a year ago is little too less. I think um, one of the advices that a very an experienced gentleman gave to me was never box individuals, right? So he said, hey, if you're say your team of 5, or maybe someone's is your close friend, and never box them saying that, hey, this is all they can do, right? That indirectly stops your thinking and limits your thinking. Rather than boxing, go with an open mind, be curious to understand what the perspective of the other individual is, which I've been doing at various point of time. But as humans, we kind of tend to box people. So I even box ourselves at times. So that was an very nice, insightful, anecdote with an individual who's experienced a lot, and I think it makes sense. And a quote is a mere quote until you experience it. So this might not feel appealing to you, but once you get into a situation where you become cautious and mindful and not to box yourself or others, it's a different world.
Okay, thank you so much. If it's right with you, I have another question as well. Like, what moments when you're programming make you think like, whoa, like I really love my job. I really love it so much. Like, what kind of moments uh, gives you that?
Yeah. So especially you dream of something, right? Programming is all about like visualizing something in your mind and making it happen, maybe on the screen or the CLI. So you dream of something, and you do it as a toy project, and you just do it for fun, and all of a sudden it blows up, and like people are downloading your module, and it gets downloaded like 10 100K times a month, and you're like, what's happening? I just wrote this for fun. And I think those moments is what I want to relive again and again. Some of the examples is, I wrote this thing called prepend instead of append. Instead of appending to a file, you can prepend things. I just wanted it for some use case, and that kind of got used by like multiple modules. And I wrote few many such modules, and I get like millions of downloads a month today, and which makes you happy, right? So something that is of a toy thing, but for fun, but is useful for many, is what is makes programming super interesting.
We have like many reactions from your answers, so that's great. And we do have one question now from Alexis. He wants
Yeah.
to ask you if you do have an advice on getting started in contributing to open source projects.
Oh yeah, that's a very wonderful question, Alexis. So there are multiple avenues that you can use to get into free and open source software. Right? Don't get overwhelmed that, hey, went into Node source and read, and it's super complex. It need not be. So suppose, say you're good at writing things up, you can go ahead and improve the README, and that's also a contribution to FOSS. And suppose you are good at writing tests or testing, there are so many platforms that helps you to open issues where you can go and test, so you can start testing. Or if you go to some of the matured repos, say for Node or React and other like Svelte and things. If you go into the repo and go to issues, there will be a label which says my first issue or easy issue. So you can filter with those issues and start looking into it and start contributing. And the next thing is don't hesitate to ask out loud. And the other thing you could do is start your own thing, like start something very small. Like for example, I started this repo called um, functional jargons. So it talks about functional programming jargon. I started as a small readme and got blown up like to like 16, 17K stars, got translated into different languages. So even something as small as a readme file with some content that you like could also be a contribution. So there are like many avenues, or you could also go and do talks and talk about a particular framework and how you implement and experiment. So there are like various avenues. Experiment with all of them. Something might be appealing to you and start working on it.
Okay, thank you so much. We have another question from Joseph. All questions are welcome, so keep adding. He says, would permissions set by Node.js class with system permissions, would permissions set by Node.js class with system permissions or security mistake then for a hack?
Would permissions set by Node.js clash with system permissions? Well, not really. Like if you're talking about the permission API that we spoke about, it is just about controlling the program from accessing particular bits like network or child processors or file system. Say for example, there's a program which is accessing your password file on Linux /etc/passwords and uploading it to a particular directory, or it says hello world but in the background it's using your system to mine cryptocurrency. Now if you pass in node and say hyphen hyphen no fs, like for example if you say node experimental permission and no fs read or fs out, then it can't really read any of your file systems, and then when you run it it will bomb. So it doesn't really collide with your system permissions. The permissions here is you giving permission to that particular program to aspects of your system. So you're telling whether that program can use the file system, whether that program can use the child process or worker thread. So if you kind of control that program, so something malicious might not happen with that program. And there are many instances that have happened in the history. So this permission is more about you controlling and letting the program access your file systems or not. It's more like say when you use an app on your mobile device, it asks you, hey, can I read your file or can I access your file system, and you say allow. Very much like that, but on the flags and APIs.
Okay, thank you so much. Joseph already also told you thank you, as well as Alexis. We have another question from Dean. So, any tip to effectively write tech blogs? Does it cost much of your time? What motivates you to do so?
Oh, that's a good question. There's something called as blogger's block. What really happens is if you're blogging for a very long time, you get blocked and you don't know what to blog about, or you feel that anything you want to blog seems silly and you're kind of blocked on what to blog. The blogger's block and an individual who is starting new to blog are very much similar. So how do you kind of avoid that is, I would say stay curious, one, and second, don't think about what would how would others perceive your blog, right? Go ahead and just blog what you feel about. It could be something as simple as what you learned today. That could be a good start. So when you're programming 8 hours a day, or you're in a college and you're doing some kind of your programming exercise, you would learn something new, right? Like for example, in this talk you probably picked up an API. Now you could go and blog about that API, and you could maintain this TIL, like today I learned, and keep blogging small bits of everything that you learned today, and thereby you're collecting all of these bits and becomes a huge ocean of knowledge. Or you can go too deep into a particular topic. Like for example, there was this good question that asked about permissions, so you could dive deep into the permissions and see how it works, how it doesn't work, what's happening, so you can blog all about it. But if you want to be completely novel, you could be one step ahead of others and go and read the main branch of Node.js and see what's coming up next and try to understand and contribute and take the learnings from there and go ahead and blog. So like recently, for example, I asked on Twitter that how many of you can name three symbols in JavaScript without looking, without referring. And I didn't really get much responses, and that's when I thought, okay, I should probably go ahead and blog about symbols. Symbols is a native construct within JavaScript. it's a primitive now, and you could use symbols, and it has a lot of use cases and attributes and functions. So I went and blogged about it, and like it got covered in weekly and all of it, right? So just be curious, and whatever things, sometimes we assume that, hey, this everybody would be knowing this is a common fact, but not really. Sometimes what we think is common is not really common. So you can choose different themes of blogging, whether you want to go deep, or you want to go precise, or something new you learned or something new you experimented, you can blog about all of those.
Okay, thank you so much. Over here, we're gonna have like one. First of all, Joseph, regarding this, he's telling you blogging to me is like commenting a program as I'm changing it. The ideas and changes happen fast, but it's hard to catch up on the documentation. And after that, Ricardo, we are gonna like end up the Q&A questions. If you have one more question, you can add it. If not, feel free to reach out Hemanth and ask all the questions. He told us he's willing to answer you back. So Ricardo wants to know, that's the node callback API will keep available, or it will deprecate in the
No,
near
it'll not be it'll not be deprecated in the future. The callback will stay forever, right? So basically, the entire the mechanism of node itself is an event loop. So you can't get rid of that. Callback will always stay. Promises makes things more easier, so you don't end up in a callback hell, right? And Joseph that's a good comparison of kind of commenting to a program, and like as he's changing it, or probably a thought that is running in your mind could also can kind of get into a blog, that this piece of code, and this is how I analyze, and this is what happened, and this is how I fixed the bug. So that could be a theme as well.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question from Ivan. He's asking, how often should we adopt using the latest Node.js version?
Yeah, so each of the Node.js versions have something called as a lifeline. There's something called as LTS, that's like lifetime support, and some of them have an end of life. After end of life, you don't really get any security updates for it, and that's when you have to upgrade for your application to be like safe and secure. That's one part. But the other part is, you get more curious, use the the node module I had authored, node-nightly, to get the nightly build, and you can experiment on something that would come probably 3 or 4 months later in node. You're already on it and you're experimenting, right? So for your application, you have to upgrade after end of life so that it's secure. For your experimentation, go on nightly and like play along and see what's happening.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Hemanth. I only have like one more question, like to closure this, something that I think it might be helpful for all of us. Like, if you could tell us what was your most recent development, like panic moment, and how did you like end up handling it? To have like a piece of advice from to all of us.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. What was my panic moment and how did I fix it, right?
Yeah,
Um, so should it be in programming, or should it be in life?
it could be. You can choose.
All right. Let me talk about programming, right? So I can't really get into the complete details of it because of the legality of the code, but I can give you the crux. So what really happened was, there was one of the issues that was highlighted where folk were able to surpass like a two-factor authentication in a particular application that I was coding on. That it was very unique in itself, because two-factor authentication is basically works like you would say, you have a mobile or an email to which an OTP would be passed on. Then you would use that to say that I am the person who is logging in, because I have another factor, that's my mobile device, where I got my unique code. So the person who kind of circumvented this found a way where he could use my application and log into a different tab altogether, and get a session there. And with that session, you would come and refresh on the other end, and it would surpass the OTP, thinking that it's authenticated, because on the other site it was a single sign-on. They used the same password and email to get the authentication right done, right? And this was like super interesting, because no one would have thought that, hey, someone can use the same email and password as a single sign-on in a different site altogether, get the authentication like tokens, and use it here so that they can surpass two-factor authentication, right? That was really kind of a panic situation. And it was kind of handled well enough, because once we realized what's happening, we knew what to be done. So we got the different set of headers at the security level, saying that, hey, we have to make sure that the security context is not kind of deduped, or someone can just pick up and share, or the session needs to maintain, saying that after you have passed in, I'm waiting for an OTP, I should be boxed in this and not to worry about wherever the other place the authentication happened, because two-factor is supposed to work that way, right? Because the authentication should happen on your mobile device. So that was like a panic situation, and it was nice to solve that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much as well for sharing that with us. So,
Yeah.
well, we are getting to the end of this TED Talk. Thank you all so much for joining us. We have learned very helpful advice from our speaker today. So, thank you, Hemanth, as well for your time. Um, this is the end of our chat, but go follow Hemanth on his social media channels. We are going to be left in the links in the comment box for you to go over there. Uh, as a reminder, this event is part of the Job Fair series. We have full agenda today with more speakers. Right now, we have a Java and Jakarta EE talk, Tech Talk. If you want to join, the agenda is going to be in the comments. And if you enjoyed this session and want to learn more about the companies that are actively hiring, we have pinned the link in the chat for you to go. Uh, Heman, thanks again for your time, and I hope we find each other again in another TED Talk soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the talk. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. See ya.
See you.